What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some interesting news about Bethesda Game Studios, who decided to, yesterday, somewhat unexpectedly, but certainly not randomly, drop a whole bunch of news, which I would actually say is mostly confirming things that have been floating around here and there. But nonetheless, they took the opportunity to confirm development of a bunch of titles, multiple Fallout games, and at the same time provide a bit of a roadmap for all of their future releases. Now for me, like a great many people, The Elder Scrolls 6 is high on my list of anticipated titles, and so I figured I would go ahead and cover all of this news. But first, let's start with why they made this announcement. So Bethesda is known for being a little more tight-lipped than a lot of studios, and in particular, it's pretty well known actually that they really like to have as short of a window between an announcement and a release as possible. So why the sudden outburst of information? Well, in this case, I think it's actually pretty straightforward. Given all the layoffs that happened a couple of weeks ago, all of the rumors and leaks about potential Fallout projects in the works, it seems to me that it became a prudent business decision for them to just be like, here is what is actually going on, so all of the rumors and everything that have been spreading over the last week don't spiral out of control. I realize people probably don't spend as much time on YouTube as I do personally, given the nature of this as my job and everything, but I would say over the last 5 or so days there have been countless videos about how Bethesda lost control over the Fallout franchise and all this stuff with Obsidian as well, and it seems to me, just before we start going over things individually, that the purpose of this announcement was to sort of set the record straight, I would say. But I'll admit that is a bit of an assumption on my part, even if it seems probably the case. Now let's actually get into what the news was. So, by far and away, Fallout got the most attention here, for sure, and they did want to say that Fallout 5 is their longest term project. Basically, Bethesda Game Studios themselves is working on The Elder Scrolls 6 right now. There's multiple other projects going on with Fallout, and then they'll be doing Fallout 5 after The Elder Scrolls 6. But in the meantime, they confirmed quite a bit. Remasters of both Fallout 3 and New Vegas are on the way. That is not a terribly big surprise. Most of those have been rumored to be in development as it is. However, I actually put out a video myself after the Oblivion remaster stating that Oblivion was the common sense one to start with because it would be the easiest to do thanks to agreed upon problems. Fallout 3 would probably be the easiest after that, just in terms of things you would have to update. So that was no surprise. Now, I will say of all of the games that could potentially have this, Fallout New Vegas is probably the one that needs a remaster the most. And truth be told, and the thing I want to focus on for this particular bit of information is that with a remaster to this particular game, I think like the primary thing you need to worry about is getting that game running off the bat. So the Oblivion remaster was great for me personally, but it also has a lot of technical problems for a great many people, and that's in no doubt thanks to the way the engine and stuff is handled there, which is a bit much for the scope of this video, but I say all that to just point out that for New Vegas, having that game run well as a baseline would be like one of the primary reasons you want that remaster. There are other things you could touch and mess around with, I'm sure, but as a baseline, it really needs to run better. And it is my sincere hope that they put all of their attention to that in particular. Now, believe it or not, that is actually not all of the Fallout news. They also confirmed that there will be another expansion for Fallout 76 next year in 2027. That is of note because a lot of the cuts to Bethesda Game Studios with the job layoffs were from specifically the Fallout 76 team, as well as the ESO team separately. But we now at least have confirmation that that expansion is still coming and the updates are not completely done over there. I am going through Fallout 76 myself right now, which was just a weird coincidence in timing, but that actually works out because that'll get me up to speed and ready to cover that expansion next year as well. They then went on to talk about the Fallout TV show and the Fallout Shelter game, as well as an unscripted show that they did some casting calls for a while back. There's supposed to be like a TV show for the Fallout Shelter in particular. Mostly just that stuff is coming, and then on Fallout's 30th anniversary next year in 2027, they will have a big event in Washington, D.C., which, if you're unaware, Bethesda Game Studios Studios like main office is like right north of DC, so they're pretty much right there. And then last but not least, they confirmed that they have a new Fallout project in the works with Obsidian Entertainment. This was the subject of a lot of rumors recently and a lot of back and forth about, whether or not Bethesda Game Studios is losing control over the Fallout franchise, this, that, and the other. And while they have nothing more to share on that at the moment, they just confirmed that that is a thing that is happening. And I'm sure with the way the internet loves to play up the animosity between those two studios, that is to say that there is animosity to begin with, which I am not convinced of personally, having visited both of those studios in person. But let's be real, nothing I say is going to convince you otherwise. So that is the important stuff on the Fallout side of things. Let's move on then to Starfield. So the main thing to know for Starfield is something we more or less knew already earlier this year when they did the Terran Armada DLC drop. I actually personally had the chance to interview Todd Howard, and he said even in that interview that there was more coming for Starfield and they have plans for a Year 3. Well, it looks like Year 3 is going to include the long-rumored Starborn expansion, and that's the main thing to know as far as that game is concerned, with the rest of the update largely being focused on the Elder Scrolls. Now, as is pretty much common knowledge at the moment, the Elder Scrolls 6 is what Bethesda Game Studios is actively working on. That is the main thing they have in their sights at the moment. That and Fallout 5 will be built on Creation Engine 3, and that Fallout 5 is currently in pre-production. Now, that shouldn't also surprise you, and this is because the way Bethesda has pretty much always worked is that while the main bulk of the studio will be working on the current project, they will have a small team doing pre-production for the next project so that as soon as they're done, they can sort of immediately switch over. They've stated that in interviews over the years and things, so the fact that they are already doing Fallout 5 pre-production shouldn't be a surprise, but it should also not imply that it's going to come anytime soon. I think it'll probably be another couple years before we see the Elder Scrolls 6, and then they'll switch over to Fallout 5. Now, they did also spare a mention for the Elder Scrolls Online, but it was limited, to be honest with you. This is the area of this update that I think was a little vague for my liking, but mostly that they have continued plans for ongoing seasons and the like in the Elder Scrolls Online, but given the pretty massive cuts to that team, and honestly the sort of lack of information given here in terms of specifics does kind of lead me to believe that they are definitely pulling back resources from that title overall, but I guess time will tell. I think it's also probably not unreasonable that they might want to chill out on the Elder Scrolls Online as the Elder Scrolls 6 comes up to its actual release. But anything I'd have to say there would just be purely speculation, of course. But that is, I would say, most everything to know from this particular update. But for me personally, outside of the stuff I have already shared, I would mostly say that it was nice to get hard confirmation of these things. For me personally, I do not like to put a lot of stock in rumors, just because, they never ultimately account for the fact that sometimes things get canceled before they are ready to talk about them, that sort of thing. And it's always a little sketchy until you see something official, and in this case, we have that official confirmation for pretty much all of these now. So that was definitely nice to see. But of all of these games, for me personally, The Elder Scrolls 6 is definitely the biggest. I have actually been kicking around how to deal with the launch of that game for quite some time when it inevitably happens, and while I obviously can't do much until we actually have some information, I will simply say that The Elder Scrolls 6 and the next Divinity game are probably the two games that I personally spend daydreaming about covering. But as for this particular video, I do think that is pretty much going to do it. Certainly hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to know what you think of all this stuff down in the comment section below. Though I'm sure most people don't need the prompting on this particular one, but looking forward to reading everybody's reactions on this one. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.